The Dave Hooker Show.
A presentation of Off the Hook Sports.
Objective insight, expertise, top guests. Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app.
Download now for free.
Also available on offthehooksports.com.
I compute and obey.
Now to Dave Hooker.
Ready.
Certainly not what we anticipated. Certainly not what Tennessee fans had wanted. After 20 years of not winning in the Swamp, that will continue to be at least 22 as the Vols lose to Florida in a game that was really never in question. 29-16 was the final, but it didn't even really feel that close. So Tennessee will have another shot to beat Florida in 2 years. And let me go ahead and start with you, Caleb Calhoun. I thought it was a really, really simple game to break down, and I'm going to tell you why I thought Tennessee was thoroughly outcoached, and I'll tell you that that's a term that I think is overused far too often and is a crutch for a lot of people in our business, but I will explain why. But first, let me just get your primary takeaways as we remind you that the big wrap right here with Caleb Calhoun and me, Dave Hooker, is brought to you by our friends at the Herald Group Security Solutions, Herald Group Security Solutions, and the Hemp House. So we'll get to Caleb here momentarily. I'll go ahead and tell you what I think went wrong as Caleb gets on board. And here it is. I think Tennessee offensively has an issue. I don't think that they either trust Joe Milton to complete a deep pass or he can't complete a deep pass often enough to scare defenses back. The accuracy is not there. I think you saw some of that last year or last week in which Austin Peay played Tennessee incredibly soft. And then when it comes to underneath passes, Joe Milton does not complete those. We can debate whether or not against Austin Peay some of those were dropped. We could have a similar conversation about some of the passes in the Florida game. However, they are not being completed. Whether or not they're drops because of lack of chemistry or Joe Milton inaccuracy, I'm not sure. So Tennessee, I thought was how does that lend itself to bad coaching? Well, Tennessee has not gone the direction that I thought they should, and that's running the football more and more often. And I think that Tennessee also has to be cognizant of the fact that until Joe Milton beats people deep, that they are not going to be able to adjust how defenses play them, which is very soft. On the other side of the football, I thought when Florida had the ball, they flanked Tennessee, and Tennessee stunts and twists and blitz schemes that they had used so effectively were negated because they were so interior designed, and Tennessee was able to get out on the edge. And then Graham Mertz was oftentimes put in a semi-rollout position where he could choose whether or not to roll out or not. So at the end of the day, Caleb, that's a lot, but I think that Tennessee was simply outcoached. I think they were outcoached too, and headed in the wrong direction when they approached this team and put it together just like last year's team. This is not last year's team. This team is one that's going to be predicated on running the football. Not that last year's wasn't. I know it was. I don't want to get in the minutia of that, but I don't see this team having a downfield passing attack for one of two reasons. Either Joe Milton can't do it, or Joe Milton, they don't have enough faith that he can do it at an effective level to run that. So let me address two passes. One to Brew McCoy. That was a great ball. I'm not saying Joe's going to miss every single one of his throws, but let me address another one. The Dante Thornton in which Kirk Herbstreit got upset with Dante Thornton for not going up and getting the ball. Agreed. But that was a slow read, and that ball was underthrown as well. So it was way behind him. If that ball's floated out there 5 yards, that defender is beat. Dante Thornton makes that catch easily in the end zone. Caleb, I got started with a lot. I was a little wordy there, but I don't think Tennessee's coaches have had a plan in place other than what they had last year, and I don't think that they have a quarterback that can do what they wanted to do offensively. Let's start with the offense, and then we'll get to the defense. I know I addressed both.
Yeah, I apologize, guys, for technical difficulties right there. I want to say, though, that I think the issue with the offense was actually, you're right. Joe Milton is not going to be as accurate on those deep balls, right? He underthrew that pass to Dante Thornton. There were a couple of passes that, look, we keep talking about the drops, but I mean, Joe Milton does throw line drives when he's throwing it over the middle. So even if they're on target, I know people say if you can touch it, you can catch it, but I'm sorry, you got to put a little bit better touch. But I will say, Dave, that
he throws a very heavy ball is the term that receivers use. So like a Joe Montana, or I'll use a Hendon Hooker. I thought they threw a very catchable ball. The ball's coming at you hot, like a Brett Favre, or I'm trying to think of another example off the top of my head. Maybe a John Elway would be another one. But those are NFL receivers, so they're going to catch more of those than a college receiver is going to.
Exactly. I am going to go here, though, because I think the issues we saw with Joe tonight, at least from actually passing the ball, and I'll talk about some miscommunication issues later, but I think those are things we knew were problems with Joe. I don't think that's what held this offense back tonight. I mean, I just have to say it. What held this offense back tonight from the start, Dave, you were right. I was wrong. They missed Cooper Mace. I mean, the interior blocking was absolutely atrocious. Ollie Lane struggled. Andres Carrick and Ollie Lane should take very long showers tonight, both of them. They embarrassed themselves, quite honestly, with how they played. They were terrible. And I don't know if you saw, because if you remember, Heupel did try to establish the run. And to his credit, by the way, I didn't blame the coaching. I thought in the second half, Heupel did what made everybody upset, which was he stuck to the run game even when Tennessee got far behind. He stayed committed to it.
Well, but here's my issue with that. Why didn't you do that in the beginning?
I think he was trying to. I don't think he could run the ball. That was the issue. They weren't able to run the ball. I mean, the guards were getting manhandled in the middle. Florida won the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball in the first half. That was the difference. And I'll get to the defensive line in a second because I got a lot of not nice things to say about them too. But the offensive line, really, the interior, I can't really put this on Jeremiah Crawford or even John Campbell Jr., although Campbell didn't hold one block long enough. But Carrick and Ollie Lane played horrendous. Javonte Spraggins did miss one block. Let's be honest, that Joe Milton interception, Dave. Javonte Spraggins missed a block. And then he turns and he's getting hit by the defensive lineman who Carrick was blocking. And so what was he supposed to do with that? Well,
I will say this. I actually didn't like Joe Milton's pocket presence. And I thought he stepped kind of off to the left into the rush where if he'd have stepped up, but that's again, minutia. Neither one of those players played well in that play. I think we could say it that way. And
Joe Milton, by the way, that's another issue we knew he had was pocket presence. So that is fair.
Absolutely. So, okay. On the defensive side of the ball, as I've mentioned, there are a lot of loops, stunts, and for those that don't, hit the like and subscribe button, and we want to get your comments as well, and I will get to those. Somebody says they have a question for Caleb. So, but with all the loops and the stunts and the twists, and for those that don't know, that's when a linebacker might go underneath, say, a defensive lineman and try to create pressure from an unusual pass angle or pass rush angle. I want to make that as simple as I can. So, those things are great when you are absolutely battened down in terms of having contain. Tennessee lost contain on several plays. I don't want to use a butch term, but eye discipline is important. They got beat on contain on several plays, and then they overcompensated at about late in the second quarter, and they gave up runs in the middle. And I imagine that's Tim Banks changing up his play calling so that his guys have wider splits on the defensive side of the ball. So I thought that was the big issue too, which is coaching to some extent because the players weren't ready, but it's also why don't you make that adjustment a little bit earlier? Now, the other thing about coaching, whether it's you mentioned the offensive line or whether it's Joe Milton allowing the clock to run down to 0 or the personal foul call, there were a lot of stupid plays by Tennessee, and it ended with, I believe, an Omar Norman Lott play. I was actually making the move to the studio, so I didn't see the entire thing. But there were a lot of just bad plays made by Tennessee's football team.
Terrible plays.
And
yeah, it
players
was
specifically that were dumb plays. I'm sorry.
It was. I mean, Heupel said he doesn't like fighting and chippiness. Well, and we thought that might be a concern. Well, Tennessee at least showed it at the end of the game. I mean, because that was pretty rough to watch. I'll say this. You bring up a good point, and now I don't know if I should blame the defensive line or the linebackers. Look, I don't want to go as hard on him as I just did Ali Lane and Andre Carrick, but Elijah Herring wasn't ready for the middle linebacker role in this type of atmosphere. I gave him a lot of credit for last week, but he's the reason they struggled with containment a lot in this game. And by the way, if you remember, he picked up a really bad penalty in the second half. It was on a third down. He got a roughing the passer. I think
I don't know that it's him so much as just his physical ability. I think that's why they went out and got Keenan Pili, because he could go more sideline to sideline than Herring. I mean, it may not be that decision. It might just be, I mean, flipping your hips and lateral quickness and speed is different than, he might be faster than Pili in a straight ahead sprint, but the ability to read quickly and flip your hips and move, I wasn't blown away by that.
Okay, that's possible too. It seemed like he was taking bad angles on a lot of running plays, though.
I do agree
with that. The truth of the matter is, Dave, why did I pick Tennessee going into this game? I said Graham Mertz isn't that mobile, and Florida's offensive tackles are terrible. I'm sorry, people I will go ham on tonight, Tyler Barron and Roman Harrison. They did absolutely nothing in this game. One of them should have stepped up, and also James Pierce Jr. And this is Dave, I got to ask you, this was the same issue against South Carolina last year when the edge rushers just didn't play with their hair on fire that game. You talk about how Tennessee practices in the morning. It seems like the night games seem to affect Tennessee's defensive line in a way that they aren't wanting to play with their hair on fire as much. And that's the second time that's happened.
It's so funny when you bring that up. When Tennessee used to practice in the afternoon and play at noon, and I was thinking about this earlier today as you brought it up, and now Tennessee practices in the morning and plays at night, I think that's as almost impactful as home field advantage. If home field advantage is worth 3 points, I almost think when you play 12 hours difference like LSU did last year when they played Tennessee, I almost think that's worth 2 or 3 points.
I think so too.
And different teams, they practice at different times. I always thought the middle of the day, frankly, but we're not going to pick apart the program after one loss. But I always thought the middle of the day made more sense because if you had to play at night. All right, I want to go to a couple of comments on our message board. Odd Sports says, as I've told you all summer long and continued, refute it would be advantage Florida. Tennessee has to do what the 90s teams did. The best thing about this series is coming to an end annually, which it may well do. I think he's saying run the football. Yes, Tennessee should have run the football more, but as Caleb pointed out, they weren't very effective at that. Rocky Top Tom saying Joe doesn't lose in Florida. Remember that. Talk. I don't know that affects the game once it's snapped and kicked off, but I have said that type of motivation makes you work a little bit harder in the weight room in the off season. Didn't need to say that, and he has to eat some crow now, Caleb.
He does have to eat some crow, and he made some mistakes in the game. We have to call him out. Matter of fact, one of the things we're missing is, so the first drive, he threw us 2 beautiful balls. Tennessee gets a 7-0 lead. And honestly, Dave, I don't know if you thought it. I felt, okay, Tennessee's about to take control of this game at that point. I just didn't think Florida had enough in them. Florida comes back and scores. Joe Milton has a bad overthrow on the very first play of the next drive. Mm-hmm. That's a touchdown. I think it was to Ramel Keaton that he had a bad overthrow. More than the overthrows, though, because I think if you're Heupel, you can live with the overthrows. You know this is what Joe Milton is. You know it's not. You know he's not Hendon Hooker. So I think you can live with that. I think the big problem. Look, I think these communication errors and these penalties, even on the offensive line, that's usually a reflection of the quarterback, not the line. And so I think at this point we kind of have to make a point that Dave, Joe Milton is not, and the offensive line are not in sync. Now, maybe it was playing in the swamp. Maybe it was the noise, but I felt it seemed like we saw the same thing last week too. So there just seems to be an issue where Joe Milton and the offensive line aren't connecting. There were 2 almost delay of game penalties on the first drive in the third quarter where they had to take a timeout. And I think those false starts are more on Milton than the line. I mean, you tell me. I don't know, but
okay, I'm gonna disagree slightly because I think you saw the same issues on the road against South Carolina and Georgia. And we could easily say that South Carolina was a different game because Tennessee had off-field issues leading up. We could say Georgia's fans were challenged, but I've talked to somebody within Tennessee's program that said Georgia's crowd clearly affected them, and it was obvious by the false start penalties that they had. So maybe this offense needs to look at a little something if they're going to make mistakes in loud venues on the road, because this just in. There are a lot of loud venues in the SEC on the road. You're going to face 2 or 3 a year minimum. So
yeah, that's a great point you bring up, because this is 3 straight road games now at night. I mean, what's a hostile environment where Tennessee played well? And don't give me Death Valley. Death Valley at noon is not a hostile environment.
I would give you Pitt, but well,
no, that was a home game for Tennessee.
Yeah, that was a home. You're right. I would give you that's a good win against a tough opponent on the road. You're right. No,
yeah.
that wasn't a hostile environment.
The
Trevor,
only one I can give you is Kentucky on the road in 2021, but it's Kentucky.
Yeah, Trevor says Milton did okay. Penalties deserved and obviously not deserved ruin it all. I mean, if Milton did okay, then okay is going to be an 8-4 season, because
I think
that it's just not going to. If that's where Tennessee is, they're going to have to massively adjust things and expect to win games 24-21 and get some breaks, because if that's where Milton is, if that's a good game, Tennessee's not going to win 10 games this year.
I think we've already the loss to Florida. Aren't we already thinking this is an 8-4 season? I mean, you still have Alabama and Georgia. And could this team right now beat South Carolina or Texas A&M? We don't even know. Or Missouri on the road. I mean, after what they did today to Kansas State. So look, I said this last year. Milton. I mean, I got a little carried away and picked Tennessee to go 11-1, but I did say it was possible that this season for Tennessee was the Cole Stout Clemson year in 2014, which was a transition from Taj Boyd to Deshaun Watson. Maybe this is like the transition from Hendon Hooker to Nico Iamaleava. And so I think that's kind of what I'm looking at this year. You're right. Milton didn't play great. I do want to address a couple of things though, because look, people are going to complain about it. This had nothing to do with Tennessee building a 26-7 hole. But SEC officiating was horrendous, and it's been horrendous now for a few weeks. And this needs to be addressed by the league. It was bad in the second half, Dave.
No, I agree. Smoky Mountain Red said they have full confidence in the screen game, though. They do, because they don't have any confidence in throwing the ball downfield. Rocky Top Tom says screen. Listen, guys, this is because they don't have confidence in Joe Milton throwing the ball downfield. They don't have that confidence. That is why. And I know, we talked about it. The play calling has been different in the previous 2 games before this one. And really, Virginia almost doesn't count, but Virginia did play Tennessee soft. Austin P played Tennessee incredibly soft. And by soft, I mean the defensive backs and secondary coverage and linebackers are dropping back. But this is not new. I mean, this was a team that was developed in the screen game because of a lack of confidence to get the ball downfield. The Big Wrap brought to you in part by our friends, the Herald Group Security Solutions, leadership experience, specialization, addressing problems through unique mission-specific mitigation techniques, also making your children safer one school at a time. That's heraldgrp.com, heraldgrp.com. If you're in a private school, go to your administrator and say, what makes my children safe? Public school do the same thing, because we're hoping to get laws changed in order for them to be available in public schools. We're talking about guys that are trained 60 days. We're talking about real guys that can protect your children. Are your children safe? Okay, now, moving on to some other comments. Joe Milton was confused the whole game. Just be honest. Carl, I got no argument with that.
Do you think he was confused, though, or just maybe rattled? It seemed like he was decisive, at least.
I'm not even talking about throwing the ball. I'm talking about pre-snap.
Pre-snap. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, he let the clock just run all the way down without even knowing it.
6 seconds, yeah.
Yeah,
that was bad. That was bad.
Yeah, I don't think there are adjustments made, and part of this is not having Cooper Mays. We got a comment from CM Jam 96 that says the offensive line was getting abused. Agreed.
This game started in the trenches.
The defense needs a clinic on tackling. Again, I think that's getting flanked, but it is fundamentals too. And this question always gets asked, and again, it's too easy. Like I began the show and I said, bad coaching. I think that's an easy crutch. But was this team too confident going into this game?
I think what happened, I will say this. I don't know if they were too confident. I think they got too confident after the first touchdown, though. And I have a post on this now. People are going to talk about the different turning points in the game. Dave, the turning point of the game happened early. Tennessee goes up 7-0. And what does Florida do? Trevor Etienne runs for a 62-yard touchdown on the very next drive. Florida kind of makes it clear we're not going away. And I think Tennessee panicked at that point. So, yeah, no, I think that I don't know if they were too confident, but I do think they panicked when Florida made it clear they were here to stay. And look, maybe it is a thing. Maybe battered Vol syndrome crept into their heads at that point. Because the players hear about it. The players are aware of the past.
Oh my goodness. So I would hope not. How have you guys not mentioned penalties by Roto 22? Are you talking about poor penalties against Tennessee? Maybe give me a clarification on that. The officiating was bad. I don't think it affected who won the game, but the officiating has been bad in the SEC. Well, really, but on a couple of different occasions. I think it's been pretty poor.
Can we just name the calls real quick? Because I do have to be fair. Again, Tennessee dug this hole, but you don't know how the second half goes if these calls are different. Because, by the way, Billy Napier coached a poor second half. He coached not to lose, and he could have given the game away if Tennessee's offense was on target, honestly. I thought he coached a really bad second half. Billy Napier did.
See, I disagree. I don't think he had any faith that Joe Milton was going to hit those deep balls, and he hit one against for Brew McCoy in a semi-intermediate deep ball to Dante Thornton. I disagree. I think you play keep away and you're playing odds. It's not exciting, but I think if you do what he did, you win it 80% of the time.
But Dave, Tennessee got inside the Florida 10-yard line. There were multiple drives. One where Tennessee got inside the Florida 10-yard line, and it was a 4th and 1 they were stopped on because the ref kicked the ball. And so Florida was allowed to sub, which was ridiculous. And then there was that horrible blindside blocking penalty called on McCall and Castles that ended 2 drives. So we're talking Tennessee loses 29-16. Oh, and then on the final drive, Ramel Keaton was clearly grabbed when he was trying to make a catch, and they didn't call the pass interference. Those 3 drives stall. They're all potential scoring drives. You look at that, all of a sudden the game could have looked totally different. So Billy Napier playing keep away worked because of his lack of faith in Joe Milton, but he was also honestly kind of lucky playing keep away.
I think he played the odds. Maybe it's 60-40. Maybe it's not 80-20 like I said, but I think the odds are if you play it the way he played it, you're going to win it more times than you lose it. But you're right. Some bad officiating certainly was a part of it. Now, it does seem the SEC has started to figure out Josh Heupel's offense some. I would actually disagree with that. I think that we thought that Jalen Hyatt was running free just because of scheme, and now he's going to make an impact this year for the Giants and the NFL by all indications that I've read. So I think we probably underestimated him and underestimated Hendon Hooker. And I think the natural thought process of that another strong-armed athletic quarterback could just step in there and do the same thing. Listen, that ain't the case. Portions of the program brought to you by the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards to ensure you only receive the best in CBD or Delta products. That's Hemp House Chat with 2 T's, hemphousechat.com. Be sure and hit that like and subscribe button. Turn your notifications on because I can't wait to hear that Sunday show with Fred. That'll be on Sunday is when it'll drop. And also we look forward to visiting with Jacob Warren and Cooper Mays in the Fall Report. And that's brought to you by our friends at Campbell's, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. And, of course, City Heating and Air Conditioning, respectively. So this from Smoky Mountain Rip. One decision that got me with Joe was when we had a free play and he threw a short ball. Granted, he may have not known, though. Well, the other one that I thought of Ole Miss immediately was the one where he was rolling to the right on 4th down, and you're going to get run down. You are not going to score. Throw the ball somewhere into the end zone. And
I thought that was on the 2-point conversion, wasn't it?
Yes, it was on the 2-point conversion. You're right.
It was. Yeah, he thought he could make the play with his legs.
That was poor awareness.
It was bad awareness.
You are not going to get in there.
And Joe's pocket presence and knowing when to run and when not is becoming more of an issue. I think one of the issues is Joe scrambled and got a good run, once in this game, didn't he? Maybe twice, maybe 2 good runs in this game.
Mm-hmm. I remember one, but it seems like there were 2. Go ahead.
Yeah, Hendon Hooker would have had about 6, honestly, if it was him. He knew, and it's funny because Joe's stronger, and he might actually be faster than Hooker. I don't know, but Hooker knew when to run, and I think that was a big issue. I also want to point out that, can you guys come to my side? The Orange Bowl should have thrown it out. I said that then.
Well,
say it now.
The Vols Solo says that. I want to get to that. Vols Solo says we look better when Milton was throwing it down the middle of the field. Yeah, they do. But the problem is he doesn't complete them consistently enough. I mean, you have to hit a lot of 6, 7, 8, 12-yard gains to keep drives moving as opposed to 180-yard pass. And I did speak to someone within Tennessee's football office that said that they were more surprised that Joe Milton played the way he did against Clemson than they would have been surprised had he played really poorly. So they were not expecting going in for him to suddenly be the superstar of Florida, but he was. And with the Clemson game, there's obviously nothing you could do. You couldn't make a move to a true freshman who weighed about $165 when he showed up on campus. Smoky Mountain Red, speaking of, says, in my best voice, it's time for Nico. Nico. And let me ask you this. How do you pronounce that last name, Mr. Nico? Iamaleava. Listen, I'm not ready to go there yet. And when I pull the trigger, I will tell you, and I won't go back because I don't think you should change back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I think if you make one clean break, you do it. Not ready to go there because I don't think that Nico is ready from a physical standpoint and his stature. But Caleb, I will say this. I was told he takes about 50% of the snaps. If he had to go tomorrow, he could. And that there is no way that that will happen because Tennessee's coaching staff is in love with Joe Milton. Short of him getting injured or suspended or something like that, it simply will not happen, is what I was told. Not 4 interceptions in 2 games in a row, which, by the way, he threw an interception and had a fumble today. So much for the ball security talk. That it's not going to happen based off play. That's what I was told. Absolutely not. Now, could that change if he throws 12 interceptions in the next 3 games? Sure. But right now, not going to happen.
And what do people think you're going to get out of Nico being put in? You're not going to have that whole develop the freshman for the future. He's not going to develop. He's not physically there. You're going to do the opposite. You're going to wreck him for his sophomore, junior, and junior years.
No,
because he's not physically there. He's going to get hit, and you might hit him and cause a nagging injury that stays with him the rest of his college career. I mean, he's that brittle right now.
If he's that brittle, then maybe that's why Joe Milton is not going to be replaced barring an injury, which would speak to what I just said based off a report of somebody I talked to. But I'll say this. He would, I think, based off what I've been told about his arm and his accuracy downfield and his ability to make reads, a lot of these bad throws from Joe Milton down the field are because he's taking too long to read it, like the Dante Thornton pass.
There's a squirrel white one over the middle that he took too long too.
Yep. So I think he could immediately make the offense better, potentially. But I think he could also get hurt on the 3rd play. And yes, I do think there is something to be said. I don't want to make some weird, vague reference, but guys go either way. Troy Aikman got that HE double hockey sticks beat out of him when they went 1-15. He didn't even win the one game. Steve Walsh did because Aikman was hurt. So he didn't win a single game his rookie year. And I remember John Madden saying this might crush this guy forever. Well, as it turns out, it toughened him. So aside from a nagging injury for years and years and years, maybe it could toughen Nico. And I'll tell you what, when Cooper Mays comes back, the pass protection is going to be better. But I'm not at that point for calling for a change, not anywhere close.
Yeah, and I'm not. I know the whole Troy Aikman thing, and I've heard that story a lot too. But I'm not thinking
there's also a Patrick Ramsey for every Troy Aikman. I'm sorry,
yes,
who was
exactly
beat up out of the league because of Steve Spurrier.
And I'm not saying that Nico wouldn't be Troy Aikman mentally. I'm saying again, you would wreck him physically. And by the way, Troy Aikman's career was cut short because Troy Aikman had how many injuries? And maybe it was because he got abused.
And was concussions. It absolutely was concussions. And I guarantee you 3 or 4 of them happened during his rookie year. And maybe 3 or 4 after the line got good for the rest of his career. Great point. We continue to great point each other. The ref killed 2 drives for us, Smoky Mountain Red. You're right. I think he coached a great second half. I think you're talking about Billy Napier, SC Scout guy. Caleb and I differ on that a little bit, but I would have done the exact same thing. I would have just kept it on the ground. Know that I don't have the better roster, which sounds weird playing Florida, but I still believe that, and that I can escape at home with a win just by being conservative. But again, Caleb pointed out, if they make a couple plays, it's a different game. So that's what SC Scout guy was talking about. And Jenny Van had a question. What about the ref kicking the ball and stopping and Florida being able to sub? That was bizarre, by the way.
It was super bizarre. And but there's another point on this too. This is where Milton's lack of awareness comes in. Yes, Florida was able to sub. They shouldn't have been because the ref kicked the ball. But the ref spots the ball. Florida subbing. If you're Joe Milton, you snap it. You snap it right there. Because you know Florida's got probably 12 men and you're not subbing. And you get the first down. Aaron Rodgers, that is the most skilled, actually Peyton Manning too, but Aaron Rodgers is the best at that. You snap when the defense isn't set and you might get a penalty. Florida was running guys off.
Grantham Shaw says we'll be fortunate to win an SEC game this season based off last 2 games. If you based it solely off the last 2 games, I would say Tennessee would be fortunate to not lose more than, oh my gosh. I mean, you have to say if you base it purely off 2 games, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to say that other than Vanderbilt, that if you just based it off the last 120 minutes of football you've seen, Caleb, other than Vanderbilt, who do you feel good about?
Yeah, you don't feel good about Missouri anymore on the road. You don't feel good about Kentucky on the road. South Carolina and Texas A&M at home. I mean, we know what South Carolina did to Tennessee last year. And even though I don't believe in Jimbo Fisher, Texas A&M's roster is better than Tennessee's, isn't it? So, I mean, this could spiral, and it could spiral badly. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with them going forward. I will say this. I'm going to give the defense a little bit of a break for a minute too, because I railed on them in the first half. But Dave, you talked to me about this, about the type of game Tim Banks calls. Doesn't Tim Banks in the defense feed off the offense scoring at will? Isn't that part of how they're designed with those stunts and pressure packages?
Yes, like Georgia is designed to control the ball. Their defense is designed to slow you down. Or stop you, of course. But Tennessee's defense, because they know they're going to be on the field so much, is designed to create game-changing plays, and they didn't.
And it's harder to create those game-changing plays when your offense is not scoring. That's a huge factor in the defense doing that.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you pick that type of defense, because the offense is scoring and you get to play with the lead and you can blow one every now and again, and you're like, who cares? You know, it's 35-7. Yeah, it doesn't matter. And then all jokes aside, where do we go from here? You start building for next year? Absolutely not. You don't start building for next year. You reevaluate the way you speak English. You reevaluate yourself as a team. You say that you have to come out and you have to run the football and you have to be able to establish the run. You stick with it. And then on the other side of the football, I think that you have to get more fundamentally sound. Let's not forget this. They're an experienced group up front, but there are a lot of young guys. And I think maybe you go a little bit more base. But no, I don't think the season is over. I think if they can either Joe Milton has to play a lot better or they have to adjust the way they approach the game offensively. Now, if they don't do one of those two things, if one of those two things doesn't happen, then you are talking about a 7 or 8 win season. If one of those two things happen, I still think you could be talking about a 10-win season.
What does a 7 or 8 win season do for Tennessee on the recruiting trail, Dave? Does that dramatically alter it, or do you think recruits kind of understand that maybe this is a transition year for Nico next year?
It's a really loaded question. What if Nico comes in with a month left and plays really well? Then the recruits are like, I want to play for that guy. So in and of itself, it's bad. Okay. But
because all the momentum from last year goes out the window at that point, doesn't it? Because everybody says, oh, that's just Hendon Hooker.
And Jalen Hyatt.
Yeah. And Jalen Hyatt, yeah. Yeah, Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt. And that's another part of the passing game that we have to point out. Part of the passing game right now is, Dave, we've totally missed on this. Tennessee slot receivers are not Jalen Hyatt and Velus Jones Jr. I mean, Squirrel White and Dante Thornton are not what those two guys were. And that's a big part of this offense. And that's how you get the Brew McCoys and Ramel Keaton's able to make big plays on the outside, is you have that threat in the slot over the middle. Squirrel White will beat you deep. He's not an over-the-middle threat at receiver right now, though.
I'll tell you this, Caleb. I don't know that we really know how good the slot receivers are, because I think they're afraid to pull the trigger on a lot of those plays downfield. And I think you have secondaries that are playing incredibly soft to avoid those plays, knowing that they can't get nickel and dime to death underneath. If defenses played last year's team like defenses are playing this year's team, Hendon Hooker would have nickeled and dimed them to death, and they would be just fine. And then they would have to adjust their coverage, and then he'd beat them over top. That was the way the game was played with an accurate quarterback. You don't have that.
But I didn't think Hendon Hooker was that good at nickel and diming, though. I thought that was a weakness in his game, if I'm being honest with you, last year. I don't know if you felt that way, but I thought that a lot of those passes over the middle, Joe Milton against Clemson in the Orange Bowl looked better over the middle than Hendon Hooker looked his entire career at Tennessee.
Yeah, but I don't even remember them calling a lot of those plays with Hendon. I mean, that's why I thought the offense was so different in the Clemson Bowl and the Orange Bowl against Clemson. And I thought the play calling has been so incredibly different in the first 2 games of the season. I've been telling people that this is a different football team. This is not a football team that's going to beat teams that are good 60-20. It's just.
And this is why you need Cooper Mays back in the game, because you need to be able to run the ball well. And they just didn't run the ball well in the first half. And this is what this all comes down to. We knew these issues with Joe Milton, so we knew the team was going to be designed differently. Dave, I told you on Friday, Tennessee needs to play this game like the 1998 Florida game, honestly. And I think they tried, but they couldn't establish any dominance in the run game in the first half at all.
Yep. I will leave it with this. And there's a column on offthehooksports.com right now. And Darla Holyfield says Tennessee was just outcoached. They were. And I think to some extent they were outcoached in the offseason when they didn't figure out a way to better utilize Joe Milton's talents, or they didn't have Nico up and ready to play. Or maybe he's just not able to play at his weight as a freshman. But clearly this is a huge downer for Tennessee, but you have to quickly put this behind you if you're a Tennessee player or coach and realize that you beat Alabama last year, and Alabama was better last year with Bryce Young than they are this year. So it may be on the road, but you could beat them again. Georgia looks like a tough task there for sure. Suddenly Kentucky looks like a tougher task. Even Missouri, as Caleb mentioned, looks like a tougher task. But you have to absolutely reassess yourself and be ready to play. And I know Texas San Antonio at one point was trailing Army, Caleb. I didn't see the final on that.
Yeah, that's in the same UTSA team last year. I don't know why, but
yeah,
totally
so
different team.
You think you've got you got a stretch here that you should be able to get a little bit better, but we'll see. I will say this. I think this is, I'm not going there. And when I say it's time to change a quarterback, I won't go back. I'll admit I'm wrong if I'm wrong, but I'll say it. Random YouTube name says, that's fine. Nico is a freshman. He would not be an improvement at all. I think that's too easy, too broad of a brush.
Yeah, we don't know. Even if he would be a little improvement, you don't, again, I keep saying you don't want to potentially damage him for 2024. I'm just going to say that given his size. Dave, who's the best team in the SEC right now? Georgia looked awful. Alabama looked awful. Tennessee lost. Ole Miss, do they have a case? They just beat the brakes off Georgia Tech 48-23.
But still go Georgia because they played down to the level of competition last year and things worked out for them pretty well. So I would still go Georgia, but we could probably sit down and have a debate, and you could probably sway some people to your side for sure that they're not.
Well,
but
y'all can also that one thing I did get right, Mike Bobo, bad hire. I'm getting proven right on that, but
yeah. And please, and Darla says, and please don't blame the refs, outplayed by an average team. Amen to that, Darla. I thought the refereeing was poor. I thought the refereeing has been poor at a couple of different occasions in the SEC, which I think is disconcerting. But no. I'm definitely not blaming any sort of Tennessee loss on the refs. For Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker. The Big Wrap brought to you by our friends at the Hemp House, Chattanooga, and Herald Group Security Solutions.